Hello, everyone. Welcome to Natty News, the nattiest news show in the world. My name is Anwar, and I'm joined once again with Pat. New year, new body. Woo. Pat, how are you doing, man?
Dude, really good. Yeah, it's second day of the new year and off to a good start with some good workout. And man, we're up bright and early today for the podcast too, so we're super stoked for today.
Dude, you know what they say, early to bed, early to get these gains. Um, but yeah, no, it's been a good new year. Did you do anything on New Year's Eve?
Uh, what did we do? We played some games online, but like I don't remember doing anything too crazy. Believe I was watching Netflix till 2 a.m. and missed the countdown. But what else is new?
Dude, this is the first year I didn't even make it till midnight. Like
Oh yeah,
yeah, I was so exhausted. I actually passed out at 11:15 and missed it all. Uh,
it's not a big deal though. When you like, I don't know how you feel about it, but like to me, it's I don't know. The turning of the clock doesn't mean anything.
yeah, no, it's true. I don't really care as much for that. New Year's never been a super big celebration for me. But
Yeah.
it always is. But it's fun when you have a group of people, and I think with the newest restrictions and all that, it's
Yeah.
not too many parties were happening or anything like that. But with New Year's, often people reflect about their goals and what they want to get done for next year. So, you have any natty fitness goals for the new year?
I do, and my new thing is that the new year doesn't start until you hit your first PR. Uh, and I did. I hit a PR yesterday, so doing pretty good. I overhead squatted 115 kilos,
Oh
so
wow.
feel good about that. I can still snatch more than I can overhead squat, but who knows how that works. But my training goals, my weightlifting goals is ambitious, but I want to do a 270 total. So I'd want to snatch over 120 kilos and clean and jerk hopefully 150, which is a bit of a big jump, but I think I can do it. Um, I'm feeling a surge of gains coming in, so it should be good. And outside of that, more specifically, I'd like to get like my grip strength better because my grip strength is so bad. Um, I'd like to get like my hamstrings working better, especially my left side, and then get my cardio a little bit better. We'll talk more about that later. But honestly, that cardio is depressing. So maybe go for a run occasionally. How about you?
Yeah, no, those are some good goals. I think for me, I've been cutting down some weight, so it's gonna keep trying to cut down. So I just broke under 200 recently, so want to try to get it around the 180-ish body weight. So keep on bringing down that weight. Um, Still work more on my swimming. I really do want to try to do a swimmer's mile, which I believe is 1,500 meters all in one go. I did 1,000 before, so just gonna get that
Yeah.
next 500 meters up. Um, and I think another goal of mine too would be working on my handstand. I think I might take some time during this current lockdown period to work on that a bit more, try to get a little better at that. But yeah, I think that would be my main goals, especially, man, dude, I don't know how this next year is going to be if we're going to be able to get more into a consistent gym schedule again.
Yeah, like the pool's open, at least where we are, so that's gonna be good for you.
Yeah, oh man, dude, that's a savior, especially with how cold it is. I don't know how you're going to get that cardio in outside.
I don't know, like one of my good friends runs every single day in the snow, so I don't know how she does it, but hey, if some people can, I can too, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I know who this friend is, and she is a beast. So yeah, she's not like us normal humans.
Yeah, I might trip and fall, so stay tuned.
Oh man. But anyways, with the new year, we're kind of gonna do another one about training series episodes. If Natty News listeners have listened before, we did one about leg training where we learned a lot of fun facts, especially the five heads in the quad. You have no idea how many people I talked to about that, Pat.
Yeah,
About
you're telling everybody?
yeah, like I would tell everyone, like, hey, you don't know you can have five heads in your quad, but it's called the quadriceps. You'd think there's only four, but there's actually a fifth one. And then people just look at me being like, wow, fun fact, Anwar. Anyways, let's talk about something more interesting. But no, I like that one. That was a very good in-depth one. But now we want to kind of go back to that and talk about training another part. Personally, my favorite body part to train, the back. So, Pat, I think both of us have pretty strong backs, and so I'd be interested to hear what you think about back training and why you should only do pull-ups.
Or why you shouldn't only do pull-ups. Well, let's start by seeing what you do already, Anwar. What do you do for your back training other than pull-ups?
Not much. Yeah, I basically just do a bunch of sets of pull-ups, weighted, change up grips. I guess though when I don't do pull-ups, I do kind of some isolation work though. So I think when you and I trained, I was talking about how I started doing a lot more of the reverse flies on the pec deck. So started doing a little more of that for upper back and. Recently, you showed me this great one-handed pullover, so I started doing that. And if I'm feeling it, I also might throw in a little pendlay rows or just even regular barbell rows, just to get some of that work in. I That's actually something I always wondered is like the value in like horizontal versus vertical pulling and like the gauge from that. Um, but yeah, I think that's kind of most of my back structure. Again, I think most of my gains I've made in my back have just purely been pull ups. Like once I was able to do one pull up, oh baby, everything else was done. Won't touch the lat pull down after that.
Yeah, yeah. So, when we look at the muscles in your back, one of the things that you miss uh, with just the pull-ups, is obviously we know there's a lower back muscle, right? The erector spinae, but I think what a lot of people don't know is that muscle is not actually just in your lower back. That muscle is three parts. We don't need to get into what the names of the parts are, but they actually run from your skull all the way down to your hip. So that's how long that muscle is. So, and that's called your erector because what it does is it sets your spine up straight, right? So it's actually like one of the thickest muscles in your entire body, and it running from your neck to your hip. You know that it's important not only for lower back health, but also for neck, upper back, and hip stability. So that's one of the main things that I think people don't know, and that's why people are like, oh, like we don't train our lower backs. But it's first of all, it's important for health. Second of all, that Christmas tree is legit looking. So uh, we'll talk about that in a little bit, and we'll talk about the main muscle groups, like which are essentially your traps and your lats. Um, but we'll also talk about how big the trap is. I think most people just think the trap is this lump here, but it runs halfway down your back. And then we'll talk a bit about those like little deeper muscles that are moderately important. Sound good?
Yeah, no, dude, that all sounds really good. I did forget, I do deadlifts too, but it's so funny to me. I always think of deadlifts as like a lower body movement, and like I consider like the lower back part of the lower body, but you're mentioning it goes all the way up to your trap, so maybe I should reconsider where I qualify deadlifts in my workout routine. Um, but no, that sounds really good. So you were mentioning all the different muscle groups we have, and I think one of the questions I have is of those major muscle groups, what are maybe some that people normally have weaker of or avoid or might not train as much as they should?
Yeah, definitely. I think the most obvious one is the lower back, like, because I think there's a lot of narratives around people avoiding lower back training. They're like, oh, like, I don't know if you ever heard this anecdote, but like, when I was like a kid reading bodybuilding, people were like, oh, you don't have to train your lower back; it just gets trained. Which isn't necessarily true. Like, if you do squats and deadlifts, you probably do train them, but if you were already weak starting out, you might continue to be weak. So I make it a point to do specific low back training often, and it's like, good for aesthetics and for injury prevention.
Hmm.
The second most common thing is with the traps is, again, as we said, most people think this is your traps, right? Like up here, but your traps it's called traps because it's trapezoid shape, right? So on the top attachment, it like the top of this triangle goes up to your neck, but it also makes like a reverse triangle, right? And that goes down to the bottom of your thoracic spine. So the lower third of your spine, right? And that part, the lower part of your trap, needs to be trained not with shrugging, but with things like elevation. That's why people do like the ITYs, right? That you've seen or that I've shown you in the gym. Middle traps could be underworked, and that's why we have to do retraction, pulling back your shoulders. And when we think about that, that's one reason that perhaps just pull-ups might not be sufficient for. Some people can retract their shoulders in pull-ups, but it's pretty hard to isolate that. Whereas when you row, because you're pulling towards, that will make you retract quite hard. So, I would say those are the two that are quite commonly neglected or not even like, thought of as something to train.
See, me being a very silly bro lifter, I always thought that the muscles that helped with retracting the shoulder blades were actually the rear delts, but it's actually the mid traps are what kind of like is the muscles that help you retract your shoulder blades.
Yeah, yeah. So like and we're being much better at physics as I am. You'll understand when the way muscles work is like they have two attachments
Mm-hmm.
and they pull the attachments to each other, right? So your middle traps are located between like your spine and then the inner part of your shoulder blades. So
Mm-hmm.
what they do is they pull it in, right? But your rear delts are connected from your arm to your shoulder blades. So what they do is they, move your arm kind of back towards your shoulder blade. So that's kind of the difference there.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, again, when it comes to anything on the body and where the muscles attach, it's funny how much I've been working out, but I still don't know what some muscles do.
Yeah, and you don't have to know them in massive detail, but once you have a vague idea of like where it starts, where it ends, then things start to make sense.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And we talked 2 weeks ago about the mind muscle connection, and that's something I've really been thinking a lot with back training because I think with back training, especially, I think it's very hard to feel it. Like,
Yeah,
I was starting to play around a bit with pull ups and being like, do I really feel it in my lats? Like,
yeah.
or am I just like moving my body up and down? So like I've been having a bit of an existential crisis of like, what am I really doing in my pull ups?
Yeah, it's a good debate to have because um the problem with compound movements is technically because of the mechanics, your lats should be the main muscle working, but they don't have to be. Like Anwar, we know, using you as an example, your upper traps are like the most overactive thing I've ever seen on any human being. But also a lot of people have this problem. So, I would theorize that when you do pull-ups, you're using a lot of upper trap. You do use the lats. There's like nothing to say that your lats are off, but they might be used to a less degree than you might think, which is why I would suggest for a lot of people to do some isolation a little bit, especially if you know you have overactive muscles that might stop you from training what you want to train.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're exactly correct. Like for myself, I do have pretty strong traps and overactive traps, and I think a lot of my back workout ends up just being more trap workout.
Yeah, even when you do shoulder work, right? If you're not paying attention, you can easily just shrug your way out of a lot of things.
Yeah, no, it's something I've been trying to focus a lot more of. So, kind of with that, how would you maybe say to structure a back workout, making sure we do hit all those maybe underutilized muscles?
Yeah. When I do a back workout or honestly any like workout, I always start with some kind of movement that works lower traps and then the lats a bit. That also
Mm-hmm.
helps your flexibility, so it's really important, right? So like, a simple thing you do if you're just lying on your back and you do some Y's, right? Just pulling back. Sorry, not on your back, on your stomach. That's really really good for the lats. And we've talked about doing pullovers. And when you do pullovers, think about pinching your elbow together, and that will create a lot more tension. That's really good. Um, and that's a good way to start a workout. And then, like, I do like very classically one horizontal pulling and one vertical pulling movement. And actually, I've changed my mind on things that if I could only choose one, I might choose a row instead nowadays. Uh, just because I think with the pull ups, it's a good compound, but it's something that if you're strong enough, you'll be able to pull up. Uh, that's not really a question, but uh, the the horizontal one tends to actually build your thickness in your back better because of building that middle region more. And It tends to be really good for shoulder health too, and most lifters have kind of jacked up shoulders, so that's something I suggest quite a bit.
Man, that's actually really interesting for a few reasons because I always was told, and again, more pro science gym talk, that if you have shoulder issues, you should do more pull ups and more vertical pulling than horizontal pulling. Um, because I guess the logic was it's easier for you to round your shoulders over when you do a horizontal pull than with like a pull up or something. And also, like dead hangs do help with like keeping your shoulders in place and all that. This feels nice to do so. I always thought that vertical pulling was better for like your shoulder health and all that than horizontal pulling, but that's really interesting. You mind maybe expanding a bit about that as well as maybe the differences of what muscles you hit with vertical versus horizontal pulling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you do vertical pulling, your shoulder blade is kind of like it needs to rotate. Like your shoulder
Hmm.
blade doesn't stay flat, right? So when you pass 90 degrees with your arms, your shoulder blade has to rotate. And using me and you as examples, neither of us have full range of motion because we have tight shoulders, right? So we can't actually get completely up there. And when you can't get completely up there, that means that at the top of any pull up overhead, your humerus, your arm bone, is completely jammed in through your shoulder socket. And it's not to say that that's going to hurt you immediately, right? But let's say you do have some minor shoulder issues, that's not going to feel great to do. Like if you did 100 pull-ups a day, like you'd probably end up with some shoulder issues. Whereas with when you do a horizontal pulling, you don't have to rely on that rotational aspect. So, for most people, even with a shoulder injury, when I'm helping them through rehab or whatnot, it's probably not going to hurt. Like, you're going to be able to get back to rowing first of all. So, from like a injury prevention standpoint, that makes the row more accessible. But not to say that pull-ups aren't important. Like, they're definitely like when you can do them, it's a great exercise, right?
Okay, I see what you mean. So someone who does have an injured shoulder or just maybe not proper mobility, it's easier for them to kind of get the gains from a row where a pull up kind of can put their shoulder in a compromised position.
Yeah, like if you start doing a lot of them, you're more likely to probably have a bit of a irritation or whatnot. So that might become a factor that holds you back from working as hard as you can. So if I could only pick one thing for someone with a poor shoulder, I might pick a row first of all.
I've heard as well that pull ups can actually help with rotator cuff health. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, yes and no, right? Because of that aspect, when you do a pull up, like depending on the position of your arm, you're internally or externally rotated, and especially at the bottom and top position of pull up, the rotator cuff's always stabilizing. Anytime you're hanging overhead, like literally just hang there, it's trying not to pop your shoulder out of place. So it's great for that, but not inherently so because if you don't know how to activate it, you're probably not using it to a very good degree, right? Like a lot of people do pull ups like they're very hunched. You can be very hunched over and bent over and still do a pull up and in fact, be pinching your shoulder more than anything. So, not inherently, but it can.
Man, no, that's interesting. So, I was also asking about for people who might not know, what's the major differences and what muscles activate differently between a vertical pulling movement like a pull up or a horizontal one like a rowing motion or like a seated row or something like that? What different muscles are you hitting and what's kind of like the pros and cons for both variations?
Yeah. So when you do a pull up or pull down or any of that manner of things, you do work more, first of all, lats because you're kind of going toward, if this is shoulder flexion, you're kind of going down and extending your shoulders. So um, that is like more highly activated. The other thing that's more highly activated is because you're doing that rotation of the shoulder. So anything that helps rotate your shoulder will be more activated during a pull up than a row. So there's a muscle called a levator scap, which elevates your scapula, your lower traps that we just talked about. Um, I would argue that your rotator cuffs get worked harder in a pull up.
Hmm.
All your stabilizers, I think, get worked a lot harder in pull up because you're stabilizing against gravity every single second that you're hanging there. Even greater if you do it on the rings, right? So,
Now,
yeah.
is this the same for the lat pull down too? Do you still get the same stabilizing and rotator cuff effect when you do a lat pull down? Oh, is it only because it's a body weight and like kind of a hanging motion where you do get that stabilizer work?
Uh, the rotator cuff and the stabilizer bit probably just through the pull up because
Mm-hmm.
you're hanging there in space and what you don't realize is like I always teach my clients to do pull ups is to like squeeze your core and make your body freeze in place, like to take away any kind of forward and back circumduction. And when you do that, you're actually just isometrically contracting all those scapular muscles to resist the movement, right? So that's what does it. Yeah, lat pull down, you might still get it if you have good mind muscle connection, but not as much.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure there is that a difference between like you don't gain all those same gains from doing any vertical motion just from the body weight pull ups or weighted pull ups. Now, what would be the difference between that and like cable row or something like that, or like even just a barbell row?
Yeah, like when you do, well, let's use the barbell row as an example. Now, barbell row becomes really good to get some lower back action because now
Mm.
you're holding that position. So I would definitely recommend that. Um, Depending on how you pull it, like if you row towards your ribs, you'll get more of that middle trap and rhomboid that we talked about earlier. Um, in my opinion, to a much greater degree than you get with a pull up, right? Because just the way it goes when you pull back this way, like when you do, that's how people flex their middle back, right? Whereas when you do a lat spread, you're trying to spread it out and like make your wings show. So if we think about the way people flex, it makes sense why the exercises work differently. But that being said, when you row, if you row towards your hip, you can get a lot more lat action going too, right? And I would say that's the main difference. Like you definitely get more mid back thickness from a row.
Okay. So you get kind of more of that lower back activation for those who might not deadlift or do maybe heavy squats and maybe do have more of a sensitive lower back for all of that. Would you maybe recommend, would you be able to actually get enough lower back stimulation through just doing like 5 by 10 barbell rows?
Yeah, like not bad. I think it's actually pretty good. The lower back is more of an endurance muscle,
Hmm.
as far as most of us know, and the reason why is like when you walk around all day, your lower back muscles are on just to like keep you stable and keep you strong when you lift things. The way people used to work in the past was not one rep max lifting. When you worked like manual jobs and had to move around, it's about endurance, right? Even when you're shoveling snow, like it's about how long you can hold out with those lower back muscles rather than how hard you can work them. So barbell row is great because you're holding an isometric. You're just bent over. You just have to hold that weight there, keeping a neutral spine for the whole time. So it's a great way to actually work those muscles.
Man, that's so interesting to hear because, like, when you imagine the posterior chain, which the lower back's part of, you think of just strength. You just think of like these big explosive strength
Yeah.
movements, but then we have the lower back, which we kind of found out is a pretty big muscle, is this pure endurance, which it does make sense because, I mean, how long of the day do we stay upright?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, it's the endurance because that muscle is so much more important to be endurance, just like your abs, because they gotta keep the core of your body in place, and that is so important.
Yeah, no, definitely. But to kind of go back to the pulling and the vertical and horizontal pulling. So we have that pull ups and any vertical pulling helps more with width and lat activation, where then the horizontal pulling is more so for the thickness of the back and more of that mid trap area gain. Is that kind of like, and also lower back. So that's kind of like the difference between the two. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And like, just to summarize, so that's why I think it's a good idea to think about doing one of each, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do the pull up, you're not getting as much of that middle back contraction. You don't get anything for your lower back really from doing pull ups. But then again, when you do a row, you don't get much in terms of those shoulder stabilizers. We talked about how being able to hang will work on your flexibility and your shoulder health too, as well as the pull up being probably better for like lat development in that sense.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So before we jump into isolations, I do maybe run a rundown of some maybe exercises you recommend for this. Because I think, again, compound lifts, that's your bread and butter. That's like the big things we should be focusing a lot on. Of course, there is a place for isolation. There's definitely value in them as well. But not everyone can do pull-ups. I mean, man, I think it took me like 2 years of lifting before I could do a single pull-up. It's a tough thing to achieve for some people. So what are some vertical pulling motions you would recommend to clients who maybe struggle with pull-ups?
Yeah. The biggest problem people have is feeling the lat. So you can do lat pull downs without feeling it for a bunch of years. So I recommend if you can do a single arm anything, like single arm pull down, or like single arm straight arm pull down, it's really good. Because the simplest way is you can take your other arm and then like you can feel what's going on there, right? When you come down, actually feel that muscle contracting. Um, and I like to always think of when you set up for any vertical pulling is to think about pulling your armpit downwards. And at that moment exactly, you will feel your lat fire right on. So that one, the pullover is great. But with any of the movements, always think about pulling your armpits down and kind of like towards your midline. And that will, any kind of movement like that will be great to start.
Okay, and then for about horizontal pulling, so we were using the barbell row as an example. Some people might not like that motion. I'm not the biggest fan of it. So would you maybe suggest doing something like dumbbell rows or uh, doing some cable work? Like, what would be maybe your like adjustment from the barbell row, or if there's even a better motion than that?
Yeah, I mean, for your compound, I think it's probably got to be a row.
Hmm.
Um, dumbbell row is great. I'm more of a I do like dumbbell rows a little bit better myself because again, I find single arm things you get a better contraction just because you're able to kind of manipulate the arm angle a bit more. Cable row is really good. Single arm cable row, especially standing, I find is a great exercise. So pick your favorite row. I wouldn't overthink it too much. Just know that if you use a cable, what you miss also is you don't get the grip work in. So it's not to say it's a good or bad thing, but you just don't get that component.
With the dumbbell and cable row too, would you also miss out on some of the lower back work too? I'm thinking. Although I have seen like people do dumbbell rows, kind of they get in that same position as like a barbell row and just kind of row with the dumbbells instead of like a barbell. So you probably do get some lower back activation like that. But once you grab onto the bench or hold onto the rack or
Yeah.
something, I think you kind of lose that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, wow, you're getting Anwar. You're ready to become physiotherapist Anwar. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's kind of the idea of like there's not a good or bad exercise, but just
Hmm.
know when you pick one, you're getting some things, but you're not getting everything, and just yeah, you're right.
Perfect. No, that's good to know. And man, dude, see, this always happens in Natty News. I come on, I learn new things, and now I have to change my training because I'm like, yeah, I don't do much horizontal rowing to be honest. So gotta start work that in more too. Um, so I think also another thing to think about is let's say you don't get that lower back activation, you don't do the barbell rows. What would be a good lower back movement? Because I think everyone's a little scared to train the lower back, and you're kind of showing that we shouldn't fear it. That it's an important thing to train. So, what are some movements you'd recommend?
Yeah, so and Anwar, this is good because I've actually made you do this before, so you're aware of this one. It's called a reverse plank. Is the I think the best lower back exercise. So this exercise is very simple. If you've never done it, you need two benches, blocks, chairs, anything. Um, one end of it, like you should put your shoulder blade on one end of it and your heel on another side of it, and all you do is just keep your butt off the ground. And Animal will argue that whenever I do this, I'm actually cheating because my butt is appears to be touching the ground. But that's all you do. You just keep your bum off the ground, squeeze your ankles together, and you should feel hamstrings, glutes, lower back. All you do is hold it. And I love it because it's very simple. You can't screw it up. It's pretty accessible. Most people can do at least 20 seconds to start. And, uh, and yeah, like it's not scary, right? It's not like doing a max deadlift. So it's a great way to get some work in.
I was actually thinking about it, Pat, because I've been trying to do it at home, and I was thinking it's kind of like a better bridge, because like some people just hold a bridge position,
Yeah.
um, and I kind of feel like this one it's a better bridge because I feel it more in like the abs and lower back than just the glutes and the hips. So like. I really like it. No, it's a good movement. It's a really interesting one too because when you first do it, it does feel a bit weird, but then
Yeah.
when you get the hang of it, it's like, yeah, no, you feel it in that lower back and especially the glutes and hamstrings too.
Exactly, and we just discussed how the lower back, its main purpose for muscle building and for your health is endurance, and so doing exercise for time is a great way to do it because you could do that or you could try to hold a heavy barbell for a long time, but that's a little bit more dangerous and hurts a lot more.
Okay, yeah, no, so reverse planks are a great option for the lower back. So now let's jump into some of the isolation, and we kind of did a bit with the lower back. So, we were mentioning too about how for some maybe certain muscles it's harder for us to train. Again, for me, I'm pretty trap heavy, so I use my trap a little too much. So, what are some of the smaller muscles that we might want to focus on with isolation movement when we do our back days?
Yeah, like we talk about the middle trap, the rhomboids, the things between your shoulder blades. Uh, good old reverse flies or band pull aparts are great. Like they're that's the way to do it, right? And they also work your rear delts and your rotator cuffs. One thing to keep in mind is that when you do them, is that pretty much anything you're trying to isolate in your back, your upper traps, if they're really strong and big, will always try to take over. So just always think about pulling your shoulders down first when you do any of these motions, and you're already going to start feeling it better. And it's kind of dumb, but after you do the exercise, if you can think about just like flexing it, and seeing how good of a contraction you can get, that actually is a decent measure of how much you're able to consciously activate something.
Yeah. No, that's a good tip actually about flexing it afterwards. I've been trying to do that more with my lifts, with most body parts too. Is like after I work it and I get a little blood in there, it's like, okay, can I move it? Can I really feel where this is?
Yeah, it's like it's all the stuff we learned from like the old time bodybuilders. Like a lot of it is really true. Like we thought it was stupid to like flex after your set, but it's a great way to learn about it, right? It's mind muscle connection. It's body awareness.
Man, dude, this is a little bit of an off topic, but for those listeners, Kai Green has this like muscle mass series of him like working with amateur bodybuilders and like explaining his madness. And I recently was rewatching all of them. They're fantastic, Pat. Like
Nice.
just his insight about training, and specifically for those who might want to do some bodybuilding, he really does have some amazing insight for it. So yeah, definitely these old schoolers. It's not just roids and drugs and everything. Like they had a method to their madness.
Yeah, they really do, and what I like is that a lot of like High Green's really good. Dorian Yates, like Jay Cutler, they're all really good about like just being mindful. Like when they're doing their set, they always emphasize they're not trying to max out. It's about feeling the muscle, and like there's a big time and place, especially when you're trying to train some muscles that you traditionally are not very strong or not very aware of.
Yeah, oh, completely, completely. It's funny now. I kind of feel people care a lot more about strength nowadays than back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Like people are very obsessed with like how much weight they're lifting, and like they're always thinking that people are lifting, like looking at them, so they have to max out. Like even on like especially these back things are they're your accessories. Who cares how much you're lifting? Just find a weight where you can actually feel it and get a good contraction.
Definitely. Well, let's go back to some of these isolations. So we talked about rhomboid work. So what are some other smaller muscles we want to work on in these isolations?
Yeah, like well, your rotator cuffs aren't really like per se part of your back, but they're around your shoulder blades, so you might as well. If you're not doing it, it's everyone's been to physio at some point, just like your basic shoulder rotations. Nothing crazy, but I do think everyone should do some because a lot of us are missing range of motion and when we're doing that. So doing anything with like a band or whatnot is going to be really important.
I actually have a question about that because That's a really interesting thing because I see a lot of times people when they do that shoulder rotation, and for those who are listening on audio, Pat was doing the motion of keeping his elbows to his side and then moving his hands from like inside and outward to kind of help with the rotated cuff. So when I see that, I often see people doing what you were just doing there, Pat, standing up straight, holding two dumbbells and moving forward and back with that motion. But I was thinking, and I remember people would tell me this too, is that that's not as effective because if you think about it, the tension isn't actually on the rotator cuff. Instead, it's going to be kind of like some of the stabilizers and even traps holding the weight outward. But instead, you should lie to your side and kind of do that same motion. So then the first of it is kind of going down and you're getting that actual rotator cuff work. Is there any truth in that, or do you still get that same effect from doing it standing like that?
No, that's huge, Amro. That's the free body diagram. That's why it works. No, but seriously, because when you do it standing, right, and the gravity is pointing downward, so you're not actually working. For you to effectively work a muscle, diff in like with actual stimulus, you got to do it against gravity,
Yeah.
or have tension, right? And that's why a band works from a standing position because the tension of the band creates that energy. That's why
Oh.
standing with a band is better than with a dumbbell. But when you're side lying, then when you rotate up, you're now against gravity, and that's why it's an more effective way to work your rotators.
Perfect. So for doing your rotator cuff works, if you want to do them standing, you should use a band, or I guess also a cable if we're just talking about tension.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
so either a band or cable for standing to do that kind of rotation movement. But if you're only using a dumbbell, then just like standing and doing it, you're not really getting that rotator cuff work. Instead, you should lie down. So then the first is against gravity, and then you're getting that good feeling. No, awesome. Yeah, because you do see it a lot, and I was wondering, like, yeah, how effective is it to do it this way of standing? So it's good to clarify that.
Yeah, and I find just anecdotally when I see people do that, people tend to take too much weight and they just don't use very good form either. And like you can do more weight when you go standing with the dumbbells because you're not actually working the rotator cuffs. So yeah, just consider those methods when you're working though.
So what would be a good rep range for this? So like, I'm guessing you maybe want to do the rotator cuff work near the beginning of your workout, to kind of get it a little loosened up and ready to go. So would you recommend like maybe like 2, 3 sets of like 10, 15 reps, um, before you start your main compound?
Yeah, before or after are fine because I find that they recover well. But same principle when we're talking about training any muscle that you want to improve, 10 to 20 reps, but with intensity,
Hmm.
uh, mind muscle connection as well as taking it 1 to 2 reps short of failure is going to be the key, I think. If you actually want it to grow and get stronger, because if people do it for warm up, they don't work it very hard at all, so it never gets stronger.
That's actually a really interesting point because like I do try to do a lot of rotator cuff work just because early on a lot of guys I would work out with were very smart and they kind of told me that it's important. But I think I've truly done like the 5 pound dumbbell for 20 reps for 5 years. I never really tried to progress on it, so that's something I need to start thinking about. Is like, okay, am I kind of just half-assing my rotator cuff work?
Yeah, I mean, hey, it doesn't have to go up in weight necessarily because they are at the end of the day small muscles and there's a ceiling effect.
Mhm.
But perhaps for you, Anwar, using you as an example, maybe working on how much range of motion can we get out of it? Are we working
Mm.
on improving that? For someone like me with a mangled left shoulder, maybe I'm working on getting the strength back in it. But always thinking about what you're working on. Can you feel the muscle and making sure you're getting better?
That's a great point, and that's something I make the mistake of is always assuming intensity is weight, where it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be. Where yeah, when we come to failure, it doesn't mean the weight. I guess also the tempo could change too. I could maybe slow it down a bit and see if
Yeah.
it kind of creates some more of an intensity. That's
Hmm.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean I think that's the main one for rotator cuff. You can work. This one's hard. I cannot describe this on camera, but Anwar, I showed you the sleeper stretch. that
Yeah.
you do on your side, but internal rotation of your shoulder. So if your hand's at neutral, just like imagine just corkscrewing it inwards with your shoulder tends to hurt for a lot of people. So working on mobility there is important too.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna see if we can find a nice video of that because that's man, dude, that's been such a good one. I was telling Pat my rotator cuff was bothering me a bit, and he showed me that and game changer. Like, man, I can't wait for when you're a full physiotherapist and I just tell Ava to go see you.
Yep. By episode 150, I should be a real physio.
Oh man. Okay, so that's awesome. So we covered rotator cuff, rear delt now. So I guess that would be considered shoulder work, but a lot of people, they kind of do everything in the back on the back day. So rear delt, you talked about how it's responsible for moving our arms back. So what are some good motions we could work on to get that rear delt stimulus?
Yeah, I mean exactly its function is great. So, your simple like bent over rear delt fly, like literally just bend over and raise your arms to the side, right? Open up, works really really well. It's a classic one. When you're bent over, you're against gravity, so that's why it works. That's why it's important to do it bent over, compared to a standing side raise. But if you're using a machine, the reverse pec deck is great. Like you'll feel a great contraction. One thing to always keep in mind again is keep your shoulders down because your traps will find a way to take over the motion somehow otherwise. So just yeah, keep the same principle in mind. But pretty simple for that one.
Dude, as I gain older, I've gained more and more respect for the pec deck.
Yeah, all these machines are like just like how I love the hamstring curl. So it's crazy. Oh
Uh,
man.
well, again, I don't want to talk about this, although we should do an episode on chest. But the pec deck has actually really helped me learn how to do more of like contracting my chest. Because
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, the chest main function is to bring our arms together. And
Yeah.
so with the pec deck, like you can really feel it. You just throw on some light weight, you hold it, and all you do is just flex your chest, and you start feeling your arms coming forward, and you're like, "What? What is this magic?"
Yeah. I think that's the cool part of working out that a lot of people who are singularly strength focused are missing out on. Like it's pretty fun when cause you're learning about your own body too. Like holy shit! Like these things are not just like for show. Like they do very like unique functions.
Yeah, so no, I'm definitely. I think that's one of my big change in opinions is I've gained a lot of respect for the pec deck in the last year. um, but again, we're not talking about the chest or the pec deck, although we should do one that I think that'd be interesting to talk about. Um, but we covered a lot of the major back, the major and minor muscles. So I think maybe a good wrap up is how would you were mentioning you structured a program so you would do one pulling and one horizontal, one vertical pulling, and then how much isolation work should we do after we do those two big compound lifts?
Yeah. It. I think if it's a weakness for you, then you got to make it a priority. We talked about how for to probably reliably say you're going to gain muscle from it, you want to get 8 or so meaningful sets a week per muscle part, right? Now, let's say you're doing your pull ups properly and you're getting your lats for 4 sets, then add 4 good sets of straight arm pull down or pull over or some kind of isolation for 4 sets after that, maybe 10 to 15 reps, going 1 to 2 reps short of failure. But I think that's a good rule of thumb. If you want your mid back to grow, then every week, are you getting 8 meaningful sets that work those muscles? Are you getting sets of rows or sets of rear delt flies or something like that? So that's probably the right rep range to think about.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot about back training. Anything else you want to maybe add, Pat?
If you're still with us, so like Spark Note summary, things that most people aren't doing. Like think about if you're working your low back. Remember that your trap is not just a triangle; it's a trap. So you got to work the lower traps too. Train your lats and do rows and do pull ups. and do isolations and learn how to flex and contract those muscles. I don't know about everyone else. I think it's pretty cool and just it's everyone should learn how to do a lat spread.
Dude, I should add that to my 2022 goals.
And we can't do a lat spread.
I can't. Mine is awful. I mean, I'm not good at flexing most things, but my lat spread is horrendous. I actually want to close on what do you think is maybe one of the worst back exercises, or once you see a lot that you're like, why do people waste their time with that?
Ooh, man. I'm sure there's some. Okay, I don't think behind the neck pull-ups are bad for you. I just wonder why people do them.
I've actually never seen that.
Really?
Yeah, I maybe I have behind the neck pull-ups.
You never see
That's
people do them?
When I hear that, what I think about is like I feel like you wouldn't be able to get the full range of motion because then your head's kind of in the way, so you have to kind of like move your head and
Yeah, the theory behind them is that you get to retract your shoulder a lot better, right? Because it's now behind you. But it's
yeah,
just it's kind of clunky, and I think most people who like you have to have like weightlifter level mobility to do it. Like
yeah.
it hurts my shoulders to do it, right? And again, if you're someone just regular working out, is it worth that just to get a little bit more retraction? That's kind of my pet peeve.
Yeah, no, I can definitely feel that. Um I think mine, and this one it's not a bad one, but I think a lot of people maybe don't do it well, is the barbell row. Like
Yeah.
I feel like you see a lot of swaying in the barbell row where it's like you're kind of just doing a deadlift, but just like a super small range of motion, like just above the knees down. Like I don't really see
Yeah.
much of
Same
that.
with the dumbbell one too. People do like the jerking motion and they just manipulate everything around except their arm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they still
Yeah.
get a lower back workout, which is important, but I
Yeah.
feel like they don't get much of that like mid and lat activation at all. Like they don't really gain much muscle from that. So I think the barbell row is one of those lifts where it can be very effective, but you kind of need a bit of discipline to make sure you get it right.
Yeah. Honestly, like I think the pull up and the row are probably two of the most like mangled exercise that people do in the gym. Like you see a lot of like suboptimal technique.
Yeah, I mean, you do see some pulls where people kind of just do a little like they kind of just do an arm workout. They just kind of go like an inch below the bar, then up again, and yeah, you don't
Yeah.
really get that full contraction or anything. But again, I also think like pull ups are hard. Pull ups, man, like to do even a
Yeah.
single pull up is tough.
Yeah, and like don't be afraid to use a band too. That's I think that's another last tip of the
Oh,
day. Like if you have those X bands, like I've even learned to like put them on once in a while for high rep sets and put my ego away. You can feel it a lot better. Uh, if you can just reduce the intensity enough that you can do 10 or 15 reps.
dude, that's a great tip too, man. Throwing on those bands, like I would say, and maybe you agree with me, it's probably better to do those banded pull ups than it is to do a lat pull down.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, lat pull down is a good ISO, but when you do the band pull ups, you're still working on your core and on keeping that body line. You're
Yeah.
getting more benefits besides just the lat, so it's good.
Yeah, and I don't feel like there's as much carryover between a lat pull down and a pull up, especially because like yeah, pull ups it's a different movement even though you're still pulling up. You still like you do get that different feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but anyways, hey, those are some good tips, a great Spark Notes rundown, as well as a few mistakes to maybe avoid. Anything else you want to close with, Pat?
No, I think that's pretty good for the day. I hope everyone's off to a good start to the new year and getting started on your goals, whether they're fitness or non-fitness, and we'll be working on them too.
Definitely, definitely. Well, with that, hope you all had a great New Year's. Hope you have a great year of making gains. Natty News out.
Natty news out.